I got quite a full-on comment from someone about it's called a hobby farm. What's with this obsession of calling it homesteading? And I'm learning not to arc up when people say dumb things, or sometimes to.
It takes a lot to set up a podcast. I thought it would be a bit more point and shoot.
I don't know. It'll feel easy after the first year. It'll be like, this is like.
But the first time we ever made a YouTube video, it was like,
short.
we just make a YouTube video.
Yeah.
It'll just be easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
All right, so podcast episode number 1, and
we're going to look back in a year and be like, oh, it was awful. We didn't know what we were doing.
People might be wondering why we're doing a podcast at all. I mean, we've got videos out there. People get to kind of be a part of our journey and our...
We've invited that.
Maybe one of the reasons is because it's pretty... Like a video that you put out on the weekend is an episode about something. It's kind of scripted. It's polished. Like, you get the feeling when you watch it. You know, there's edits. There's, B-roll footage and drone shots and stuff like that.
It's not like behind the scenes or anything.
Yeah. No, that's right. And so we've got some of that content. Yeah, I watch some of those other channels sometimes and I kind of go like, oh, I wish I could just kind of sit in the corner and actually just watch them. Because even behind the scenes stuff that you put online,
it's all curated.
It's curated.
It's all curated.
You're thinking about what's valuable to the person.
Yeah, we don't want to waste people's time.
But then at the same time, a podcast is valuable.
Well, we talked a lot about what kinds of videos we would make. Would it be like a vlog? Would it be like
for
a
the
tutorial?
main channel, you mean? Yeah.
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 Like ad nauseum. And I think we still have those conversations sometimes. What are we trying to achieve here?
We definitely landed somewhere in the middle of that tutorial versus daily vlog.
Which is tutorial, daily vlog.
Yeah, that's like right. How to
in
lifestyle.
Between the both of us.
Literally, the category that YouTube puts us in is called How to Lifestyle.
How to Lifestyle.
Yeah, hi, I'm How to. This is Lifestyle.
And together we are How to Lifestyle.
I feel like our weekly episodes lean a bit more how to, and only because usually they're centered around a topic. And people that watched our planning video recently, like how we lay out and plan projects and the weeks and months ahead, will have seen that we plan our episodes around what projects are going on, but we also plan out our projects based on episodes so that you never get 2 gardening videos in a row sort of thing. So
there's a lot of planning that goes into...
But the nature of doing videos that way means that there's always a topic at the center of it, which kind of makes the videos lean into that how-to, because it's like, well, now I want to give value to that topic. The topic is building a composting toilet setup. Well, now I want to include valuable information.
Well, it helps us keep on track as well.
Yeah, definitely. Getting stuff done. Yeah.
No, but it helps us keep on track in terms of the kinds of content that we're putting out, the kinds of videos that we're putting out.
You were saying about it keeps us on track.
Yeah, it keeps us on track in terms of making sure that we're not just waffling. Well, here's this project that we're working on this week, and like it really helps us produce quality, valuable content, which is another thing that's important to us. Yeah,
and we're trying to build an audience at the same time. We're also playing the algorithm game, and so it's trying to find that sweet spot of timing. Okay, we've found that about 25 minutes seems to suit the people that are interested in what we're producing, so then you can't afford to waffle, because 25 minutes is like 4 little 5-minute segments.
Yeah, that's how we usually
and a
break
bit of
it down
padding.
to,
Something like that. So I guess coming back to why then would we even do a podcast? I feel like it'll balance out the overall Rustic Spirits experience, in terms of if the main videos do lean a little bit more how to, the podcast helps it lean a little bit more lifestyle because of that raw, unedited, true behind the scenes.
I think it's also, for me, there's lots of things that we want to talk about or make videos about, or like that are included in this whole homesteading and building a homestead that aren't like interesting to watch. Like that's the reason that I was like, okay, yeah, maybe a podcast is a good idea, because I was the one that was hesitant about it, is because there's conversations in this space that are really important.
Yeah.
That aren't like easy to, it's not a build, it's not a...
Yeah.
It's there's not a lot of B-roll to put in there, that you're not filming anything other than us talking about it and opening up the conversation to the wider community. So,
and think about how much footage is ending up on the cutting room floor, as they say.
Yeah.
We're getting better now at understanding how much content fits into a 20, 25-minute episode. And so we just don't, like even this morning, that conversation we were having about whatever video it was, and I was like, last night we were talking about a landscaping video. It's like, maybe we could make it about landscaping all of the whole property. And it's like,
no, that's too much.
That's the mistake we make of going,
cram too much in.
But it comes from this place of, I don't feel like I'm going to have enough content, so let's just think of all the ideas that are related to that topic.
It's still pretty wild to me that people watch our videos. I love it, but it's pretty wild to me.
It is, and I guess what you're saying is it's pretty wild that people watch our videos. Like, we've been doing this for years, watching other homesteaders, watching projects like this. So it's not wild that exists. It's just,
I don't know, the whole thing's wild. I'm still getting used to it.
I think my revelation about that is our kind of inner circle of friends is actually quite diverse. But there's also... there's a few friends that are doing this journey with us and that were part of kind of the last phase of what this journey was. But the majority of our friends aren't homesteaders. And so, it's like when
our friends are homesteaders.
It's like when you're into something like, I don't know, so I'm trying to think of something that I'm just not into. Formula One racing that my daughter is into. So, all right. So, yeah, but then you're looking for someone to talk to about F1 because that's your thing that you know. And you know that there's kind of a limit to how much you can talk about that with people before they're like, oh my God, not another Formula One race.
I don't know how to relate to you.
Yeah. And so you in social circles, you learn how to kind of filter yourself and keep your topics varied and even though this is our life, and I guess our friends are interested in it because it is different, but then you expose this to an audience that's 100% on board about the one thing that you're passionate about. It's this mind-blowing, I'm not used to so many people.
You're like me.
Yeah. Or we want to know exactly what you know and all of the aspects of your life. It's like, whoa, normally I have to kind of keep that under wraps so that I don't come across as the crazy person.
Not everyone enjoys, not everybody is keen on getting a milk cow.
Or even understands, why would you have?
Or I'm getting pigs tomorrow.
That's actually legitimately happening.
That's legitimately happening. We're picking up our pigs tomorrow.
Oh, I've got to think about that.
And everyone's like, did you get your pigs yet? But it's not because they care. It's because they know I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, true. Yep.
So I guess hi to all of our homesteading friends who love it as much as we do.
Yep.
Or want to do it.
I do think now that we're saying that out loud, the main motivation for this podcast would be all of the stuff that we leave on the cutting room floor. That when we're planning out a video, we're like, we could go into this or we could talk about that. And I guess too, because there's years of experience behind us, this feels new to a lot of our audience, I guess, because they're a few months, 6 months, a year into the journey.
I don't think it's new.
No, our journey has only been shared for the last 12 months. When did that first video go up? End of March, start of April, something like that?
The first short.
Yeah. No, the actual first long form video I think was I can't remember. You could look that up. Yeah. So what I'm saying is most people have jumped in on that journey
somewhere along the way
6 months ago, 3 months ago or whatever. So it feels new to them.
Yeah.
And because this is a startup project, this is a build from scratch project. So
but it's not us starting homesteading from scratch. We're not noobs.
That's what I'm saying. So we've got
we're nerds
that
at the whole thing, but we're not
experience
yeah.
and kind of like urban homesteading stuff
Yep.
that we did in previous years.
We
that
really
we're
did
bringing
grow
to it.
into it.
And so it's about like being measured about how much of that I'd love to just jump on a video and go, here's everything that I know about regenerative agriculture and how to strip graze dairy cattle. Like, but that's...
I wouldn't listen to it, I'm sorry.
No, but you know, then you go,
I've listened to a short.
Where
Like...
does that belong? And that, yeah, I guess it's like all these guys that we've watched, like say like a Justin Rhodes or that we've watched for 10 years.
Yes.
I now feel like I understand the depth of his knowledge because
Yeah.
I've had 10 years with him. And
you signed up to his
Abundance Plus.
Abundance Plus, like
when it started. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was like, I need to know everything this man knows. Yeah.
He was probably one of our biggest instigators in this whole funny. Dream. Hey.
He did it. Yeah, definitely. One of his latest videos is a little bit of a look back at stuff because they're rebuilding stuff since the hurricane and like footage from years and years and years ago and just like how different he looks and yeah. Yep.
They've had some kids since then.
Yeah, and some health stuff in that. Yeah. But just like also just how the journey like relaxes you and how the YouTube experience probably like you relax into it after a while.
How long do you reckon it's been since we wanted to do not the homestead side of things, but the YouTube side of things?
The YouTube side of things? Oh, sorry.
YouTube podcast content. I mean, you want to write books.
I think I was thinking about it maybe about 5 or 6 years ago.
I'd say that's
when we first started like real farming. And when we started doing tours and kind of like guest things where we were, workshops and that sort of stuff. And I was like, I really, you
really enjoy it.
Yeah, I missed teaching. And so that was an opportunity to teach, but I really enjoyed, it puts me in a place where I have to know my stuff. I think I always liked that the most about teaching is like, you can say I don't know, and you definitely don't want to fake it, but you can't be the least knowledgeable person in the room.
Well, you can, but you don't want to be.
No, I think a teacher definitely can't be the least knowledgeable person in the room.
Some people do it. Some people do it.
Okay, technically you can get a job as a teacher if you don't know squat, but you shouldn't be. You should be at least somewhere in the top 50th percentile. My goal is that I would know. Yeah, my goal is that I would know something about what I'm
conviction.
Talking about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess especially when people's money and time is involved as well.
And you want to do the thing that you're passionate about, justice. Like you want to communicate impart, I guess is the good word for it.
And that's probably where like I just never became like a high school teacher or a primary school teacher, which I thought about.
Constrain it into a curriculum.
Well, more just like it's the job. Like the teaching jobs that I've done have been very topical and passion projects of mine. And so that's always been fully integrated. I don't think I could teach, year 8 science if I just had an audience full of, I don't know.
Hats off to year 8 science. I was literally going to say,
if you're a year 8 science teacher,
we couldn't do it.
Hats off to you because
we did homeschool our kids. That's another story for another day, though.
Different again, though. Like my audience there is a captive audience, whether they like it or not. But I think that's why, so back to your question, why I gravitated towards this idea of doing YouTube and putting content out online. It's like, well, I'm putting all this effort into this study. I want to share what I know in the light and context of who we are and what we're doing, my personal take and bent on it. I think the thing that cemented it for me was meeting Mark from Self-Sufficient Me.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Just that one little conversation.
It wasn't one little conversation. It was a beautiful day that we spent together.
True, but what I'm highlighting is the moment, that one little moment where it was like, why aren't you guys on YouTube? And so nice from I guess because YouTube can feel competitive sometimes. Like I look at other channels, Mark's a gardening channel, so there's an alignment, but it's not a competitor, so to speak. But you sometimes do, as a creator, like then look at other channels and go, oh, they're my competition. Not really. I'm not making enough content for my entire audience to be occupied with all the time.
The variety is what makes it awesome.
It was a nice window into that creator world is actually quite a sharing world.
Community, yeah.
And that just aligns so nicely with the overall homesteading philosophy. I think for me that's cemented it. It's like, oh, okay, it's not it's not going to bastardize what we have as a homesteading philosophy of sharing and, you know, trading and bartering and giving away and being generous with your, you know, time and your efforts. The YouTube world is that as well. And so it just, it's this really cool alignment. And so maybe that's why this podcast as well, like maybe that's an opportunity to just give even more of that.
I guess we want it to be practical as more than philosophical, but there's a philosophy behind homesteading that you either get it or you don't. Like there's, back in the day, let's call it before the real Kirsty, corporate Kirsty, there's no way that I looked at that going, no, I do not want that.
The homesteading life?
Oh, nah.
Yeah?
No way. No. I
What?
had this image of like Little House on the Prairie, disempowered women.
Oh, like apron in the kitchen, that cliche. Yeah, fair enough. And you know what? Like there's probably an aspect of homesteading that is that.
It is the complete opposite of that. So that's where I've had to grow into this is actually when I listened to myself, it was like, oh, I really do want that simple, slow life. And I don't want microplastics in my food. And I don't want, you know, like there's all of, like, for me, it's been a very mental health, identity, clarity kind of progression into.
And it is one of those Neo awakening from the Matrix moments.
Definitely.
Where it's like, oh man.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I want something different.
I know, and I can't unknow. I mean, I guess you can be like Cypher and be like, I just want to eat a steak. You know, like you can find a way to replug back into.
Oh,
but you can actually know in reality
I dab my
you
toes
can't.
back into it.
Yeah.
And then I go, ugh.
Yeah.
No.
Once you're awake to.
But it's about the individual and what the individual wants. It's not like you should all be homesteaders. Because it's not for everyone. So
that brings us to an interesting point and kind of the topic that, or the title that we might call this episode, homesteading versus hobby farming. And I'll tell you what I was thinking about that. It never occurred to me to call what we're doing as hobby farming. And I think maybe that's because in my childhood, I definitely met people that, I mean, for a time I lived on what they probably called a hobby farm. They had one goat and one cow and little gardens and stuff like that.
I lived on a hobby, like when I was little.
Yeah, and there was definitely a generation that referred to that as hobby farming. So, but then our inclination towards this entire lifestyle has been through that homesteading.
Yes.
So just to kind of lay those two words out on the table. And then it never occurred to me to even think about it as hobby farming again. I just always delineated between the two. Oh, that was those guys. It wasn't their real job. It wasn't their real life. It was something that they had property and so they did that with, versus this entire philosophy and world and, you know, community. Then in one of our first videos, I got quite a full-on comment from someone about, it's called a hobby farm. What's with this obsession of calling it homesteading? And I'm learning not to arc up when people say dumb things, or sometimes to learn to look at it from someone else's perspective and go, maybe it's not a dumb thing.
You have to walk away sometimes from the comment section.
There's definitely comments that
But that comment, that wasn't the only time. That's happened sometimes on every video.
Yeah, well, it was a one-off for a while, so I did.
Had that on.
Yeah, I think I might have addressed that one, or I ignored that one, and then it went a few weeks, and then it didn't come up, and then you're right. Over the last few videos, there's been almost a video where someone's going, "Why do you call it homesteading? It's hobby farming."
It's just hobby farming, and I'm like, well, this doesn't feel like a hobby.
But the question that begged for me, because of how I'm learning how to engage with comments, sit back, try and see it from someone else's perspective. My first thing has been those comments have almost exclusively come from people who are a little bit up in arms about it. You know, they're kind of passionate about it. And then I'm like, why that reaction? So the teacher in me goes, there's
something to learn here.
Is it about this person and why they're kind of, what does that rise up within them? Oh, damn, why did that just go off? So, before the camera did a weird thing just then, like, leave that bit in the video, Noah. Like, the technical difficulties abound and this is raw and behind the scenes. I mean, cut out all the
I think we'll be
waffle.
going out to buy a new phone this week.
We'll see. Yeah, maybe. Okay, we were talking about why did people get up in arms, so to speak, about what I thought was just a phrasing thing. To me, there was a difference in understanding about what each one was, and it was kind of obvious to me, and maybe that comes from that space of, we've been following like a lot of these people in the homesteading world for 10 plus years, and we've been thinking about doing it seriously ourselves for X number of years, and then we've also been thinking about the YouTube space and then building online community around it all. So it just never entered my mind to question the terminology. I wonder if, and because our audience is largely Australian at this point, that might change, I don't know. Happy if it stays Australian, that's fine. I wonder if that's coming from, that position of Americanization.
Maybe.
Like they're seeing a generation become American, whatever that means. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with.
It's interesting because whenever we've talked about homesteading with people, and we've met a lot of people over the last few years, or over our lives really, but whenever I've talked to somebody, it's never come up face to face. It's only since we've started putting it on YouTube. And I wonder if it's an older Australian.
Yeah, and you're really saying keyboard warrior, aren't you? Yeah, but that's true. There are some things that you probably wouldn't. Yeah, so you're saying like when we've done like tours and workshops and things like that, and we've
the homesteading thing is like, oh yeah, I know what that is.
I know what you're talking about.
And there's no like, why are you calling it that? And it's only because the way that these comments are written, you can tell it's definitely like, why are you calling it that? Like it's quite condescending and it's quite like aggressive. So I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. It's just different.
Yeah, that's where I disagree a little bit, because the teacher in me goes, words are important, terminology is important, definitions are important. The reason that we teach kids what words mean, the reason that we have multiple words that have very similar meanings is because in context, choosing the right word, like communication is a thing that happens where my thoughts have to get to your thoughts through words and ears, and the word that sits in between us is the thing that's trying to do that job. So my first inclination was to kind of go, well, I'm going to defend terminology here like a teacher, but I actually think I don't think people care about language as much as I do.
No.
So
I'm sitting here going, this is really fascinating, but I really couldn't care less.
Yeah, so I do, because I'm like, the word you choose matters because it conveys something, but I don't think that's where those comments were coming from.
No, I mean, I couldn't care less about the difference between homesteading and hobby farming, not about the value of words. I definitely care about the value of words, definitely.
Yeah, but so my first few responses to some of those comments was to defend it on the basis of the words themselves. And I actually went down a rabbit hole and started exploring where was the terminology used. Thank you, ChatGPT and Grok, for helping me find some things.
Let me show you somebody who was up in arms.
Yeah, but I didn't I have enough of a filter not to put it on the comment section most of the time. There's been a few times I've retaliated.
Sometimes I think that we could go viral based on your replies to comments. I
don't want to take that risk.
Maybe it's a secret channel that I'm going to start up, which is like Regan roasts the internet or something like that.
What I really think about you, what you think about me. Yeah. But taking a step back and going, what are they getting at? Like, why does this upset them? And I do think it is probably that. The majority of our audience, our analytics at the moment tells us that it's mostly Australian. It's more male than female, and it's more older than younger. So there's that older Australian guy sitting at his computer going,
no, I think the women are worse.
These damn kids and their American accents. And maybe, I don't know. I'm making an assumption here, but
maybe
it feels
the comment section of this podcast is going to inform us.
Yeah. It feels like that's where that comment comes from. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like share if you think it's something else, what you think. I think that's where it comes from. So I actually don't want to bother. I can't be bothered.
You don't think there's any difference in Australia?
Oh no,
homesteading is called hobby farming.
I definitely do. So that's what why I wanted to use this as a catalyst for a conversation today, because I really don't care that someone's getting up in arms about a word that seems to be more American, and they're trying to in some way preserve our Australian heritage and culture. The truth is, I did the deep dive, I did the historical research. We actually used the word homestead in Australia long before we used hobby farming, and hobby farming is a tax terminology.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was introduced. So homesteading's been around since at least the 1800s, as far back as I could track and find like articles and like I did the deep dive.
When you live on a homestead.
Yeah, the word homesteading, and it's not even an American thing. It traces way back even before. But I guess the modern version of homesteading has been popularized in the likes of Mother Earth News, which is, like an American publication from the 70s. Which is funny because it's around about the 70s when the terminology hobby farming came into Australia. So you won't find that terminology in other countries because it got introduced here as a way to define certain things for taxation purposes. So that's about as far as I went with it. And I went, oh, okay. So the word homesteading is older than the word hobby farming. Right. And the word hobby farming is actually kind of one of those meaningless legalese words. But probably what's happened over that 50 years then is homesteading became this more Americanized thing, probably out of the likes of Mother Earth News and then like these homesteading associations, largely in America. And then hobby farming became this more widely accepted term because people were using it to declare themselves as such for taxation purposes.
Got ya.
And that it just entered the psyche of the Australian public that this kind of lifestyle that you live is known as hobby farming. And yes, Mr. Taxman, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Into the internet, when all of a sudden those two worlds then recollide, and a word that we used to use, homesteading, which referred to the parcel of land, the block of land that was in the part of your acreage property where you lived. The home, so the building, and it's outbuildings and it's direct amenities and kind of all that up close stuff. So think permaculture. That was known as the homestead for like decades, centuries almost.
Right.
So the word exists in our vernacular, but it got kind of superseded by hobby farming. And I think that's where that clash has come from. That's about as far as the deep dive I went, which is probably too far for most people. But it was interesting to me because, like I said, I don't really care about why someone gets upset about a word that feels more American when in truth it's not. What it actually prompted me to think about for our lives, and this is where I'd want to know what you think, is what we're doing a homestead or is what we're doing a hobby farm? And do you see that you've just said you don't think that there's a difference.
It's not a hobby.
But let's say you have, there you go. Let's say you have two words that you can use in conversation. Why would you choose the word homestead, homesteader, homesteading over hobby farm?
I guess it's a function thing in my mind and in my I'm not going to say less educated, but less analytical mind. Hobby farming is like, I grew up, mum and dad had 5 acres, we had a veggie patch and some chickens and a demon-possessed rooster and 2 goats. But dad went to work every week. He went to the city to work and he came home on the weekends.
Yep.
So it was like, it was a lifestyle decision that I think they probably would have liked to have turned into something a little bit more self-sufficient. Yep. I guess that's where we're all here now.
Yeah, yep.
40 years later, 30 years later.
Say that out loud. No, I think it's closer to 40.
Whereas that whole homesteading idea is really that self-sufficient, it has that undertone of sufficiency, of a breaking away from reliance on conventional systems. It's a way of thinking about the world.
Okay. Yep.
This is, to me, a hobby farm is like, I live and work in the city, but at least I get to go home to the farm You know, it's like my little piece of paradise. There's not many people around. I don't have lots of neighbours. It's where I can enjoy my life. Whereas for me, a homestead is, and there's urban homesteaders everywhere who would love more land but can't necessarily like get there. It's that idea of self-sufficiency and self-reliance or communal reliance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think like
I don't
I'm
explain
hearing
things as well as
I
you
think
do.
it's fine. I think I'm hearing 3 or 4 different kind of like streams of thought, and it's funny because what it is there's actually all of these overlapping ideas, and I wonder too if that's because like I might make a video about how we're filtering our water on our poly tanks, and that task or subject is going to be 100% applicable whether or not you're a homesteader or a hobby farmer. Let's say there is a difference between the two. And so that may be why somebody who only knows the term hobby farming or is only comfortable with that term goes, why even call it something else? And what you're saying is that there's a broader aspect to homesteading, not that one's more broad than the other. You said definitely source of income helped you delineate between the two. So what I think is interesting about what you were just saying is that there's these areas of overlap over the two. And so maybe what some people are experiencing is I'll make a video about a poly tank and filtration. That video applies whether you're on a homestead or a hobby farm. But some of the other aspects that you just talked about are really exclusive to homesteading. So the first one you mentioned there was kind of income source. Your family's original farm, you would classify that more as a hobby farm because it was a lifestyle choice, a little bit like a ski boat is a lifestyle choice, but doesn't necessarily make you an Olympic skier, right? So it doesn't denigrate the fact that it takes all the same amount of effort to feed those animals and to tend those gardens and to do all of that, but you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You
could buy firewood.
It's nice that you've got your own food that you've grown. And a lot of people probably enter this lifestyle that way. And so there's probably this fuzzy line there somewhere where people moved from, this is the thing that I do on the weekends because I just love
it,
to all of a sudden, you're neo popping the red pill and it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's what happened to us. Well and truly.
Yeah. So source of income would be one. And then you talked about philosophy. So there's like homesteading philosophies of things like self-sufficiency that definitely apply. If you're a hobby farmer, you may blend a few things in, like you may still just eat a whole lot of processed food. A homesteader finds that really difficult and challenging because once your eyes are opened to it becomes a philosophical thing rather than a lifestyle thing. And then I think the other thing that you were talking about there was the community aspect of it as well. You can be a hobby farmer and not actually build any of your own community around the idea of hobby farming because again, it's like owning a ski boat or being into Formula One racing. You know what I mean? Like, whereas it's nearly impossible to be a homesteader without having that homesteading community around you. And I think that's what I am loving so much about the online aspect of it and why I couldn't give a rat's about whether or not we use a term that's American or not, because the community around it is just so empowering and beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between homesteading and hobby farming and what I wish I could say in the comment.
Let's be honest, like we are homesteaders because we're moving more and more towards self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
We still have to go to the grocery store at this point in time.
I don't know that there is any such thing as a person that's doing the homesteading thing.
The Amish do it really well.
Yeah, but they don't make YouTube videos.
I really don't, like, there's so much that we can learn from the Amish people. Like, there's so much that we can learn. But I really want to write a book that says homesteading doesn't, like, off-grid doesn't mean Amish. Because so many of our friends are like, so do you, like, how many times a day do you shower? And I'm like, what kind of question is that? Twice? Like, what do you wash your hair with? I'm like, shampoo.
So, like, And I wonder if that's because there is an inclination within you when you're a homesteader to be the master of your own domain in as many domains as you possibly can be. And like, just to like throw back to self-sufficient me, Mark, again, one of his sayings is you don't have to be self-sufficient in everything, just be self-sufficient in something. And maybe a more clarifying statement than that is you literally can't be self-sufficient in everything.
It's not good for you, I don't think. That means you're isolated.
That mentality comes from an isolation mentality. Yeah, like,
that's
well,
really
screw
dangerous.
the world, I'm going to make my own soap.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
sorry if you make soap. That was the first one that came to mind. I think I was literally going to say salt, and then I was like, oh, you don't make salt. Don't say make.
You could
harvest your own salt, and then soap came out. But actually, soap making is one of those cool things.
That's the next thing that I want to do.
Well, then we have to get goats.
No.
Come on, goat's milk soap. It's like the best.
Tallow soap.
Oh. Now that is a real...
Mum and I have already set up a date next week. She's got tallow in the freezer. We're going to learn how to render it.
So I really just insulted you and your mum at the same time.
Come after him, Mum. Defend our honour. Well, I thought it was going to take me all year to master sourdough, but
there's a ceiling on it though, isn't there, where you are going to get to a saturation point in your time and efforts where you literally would love to make your own tallow soap and harvest your own salt and, you know, like do all these things. And at some point you have to kind of go, well, I've got to sleep.
The thing that I think that I'm learning about homesteading that underpins all of it, philosophy, function, is the desire for freedom. And I'm free to make my own choices. If I don't want to make my own soap, I can buy soap quite easily. Like we're industrious enough to be able to make money to buy soap if I don't want to make it, right? But I'm free to choose that. And I think that's what, to me, homesteading is more than anything, is it's the pursuit of your personal freedom. And it's the embodiment of your personal freedom. And that will look as different as the amount of people that are homesteaders. It looks different for every single person. Their reasons for doing it are different. What they do is different. How they do it is different. But I think what ties us all together is this idea we are free to make our own choices and to do what we want with our time, with our energy, with our bodies, with... Yeah, we still live in the constraints of, you know, the countries and the cities and the society that we live in. And sometimes that's frustrating to us because those things seem to constrain... Too much constraint. Like, I will go out there and say, like, we are over-governed.
100%.
But there are basics to a legal system that we need to have. Like, I get that. But on the whole, I think homesteaders want to pursue and live in their own freedom.
So that's interesting because it just reminded me, another thing I was thinking about when you were saying about those differences, and you just mentioned urban homesteaders. And I think that's why such a thing exists and why you'll never see an urban hobby farm. Like, that's just a contradiction in terms and an oxymoron. Urban hobby farm doesn't make sense because a hobby farm is certain functional things, like maybe it doesn't have to have animals, but it certainly has to have space, probably under an acre is pushing it, and has to have an aspect of some sort of farming enterprise to it, where there may very well be people who would legitimately call themselves homesteaders who live on less than an acre, don't have any animals, and maybe don't even grow their own food. That's probably less likely. But there'll be certain pursuits, like the freedom pursuits that you're talking about, that actually just put them in the community of homesteaders because of the philosophical alignment of freedom.
They're freer thinkers. It's like they transcend the construct of modern society, really.
Yeah, I like that thought because it's not the throwing off of the shackles of technology or electricity
tyranny and oppression.
I use ChatGPT as much as the next person.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you a homesteader. You might gravitate that way because of your homesteading philosophy. You might kind of go, do you know what? I don't want any more synthetic materials or chemicals in my life. Some of those things, I think the more that you participate in the community, become more and more apparent to where it just becomes part of it anyway.
Yeah.
Which is why I would say it would be unusual to find a homesteader that doesn't grow at least some of their own food.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you have to. Whereas
You
a
can
hobby
do
farm,
you can
you
do what
have
you
to do
want.
certain things, because otherwise people are going to go, why do you call this a hobby farm? It's a backyard. I've got one of those. You know? Yeah.
That's a bit extreme.
No, but we started calling ourselves homesteaders when we lived on a 500 square metre block, and I looked this up the other day because someone asked me and I measured it with Google Earth.
In Burleigh?
Yep. We had canal frontage.
I loved it.
A 350 square metre home on a 500 square metre block, and only 80 of that 150 non-house square metres was gardens. And the majority of those gardens were hedges that we had to hide our blooming veggies in because the body corporate said you weren't allowed to grow food there.
The old people didn't like.
The old people didn't like us at all.
No.
But when people ask, when did you become a homesteader? It was on that 80 square metres of hidden vegetables, because it wasn't about the size property that we had. It was definitely more about the mindset that we were shifting into.
It was the total 180. And I'm, maybe not you, but me, it was a total 180.
So I think we might call this episode here, because I had in mind that maybe the next episode is going to be something like why we left the rat race. Ooh. And there was definitely a moment.
I can feel that story coming
there.
on.
I know, that's what I'm sensing. I'm like, oh, we're shifting into backstory here, and that's cool, but we might save that for next week. Because it was probably in that space, in that house, where that fuzzy grey line that I talked about before, like the moment where you move into, now you're a homesteader. Look, retrospectively, I tell people that it's there. It probably didn't feel like it until we got goats for the first time, 4 years later. But
when I milled my own flour.
All right, we're getting too much into the backstory, and I definitely want to save that for another episode. So we're going to leave it there.
Watch the next one.
See you next week.